So I have some good experience.
Do you have a favorite interview that you've had so far?
That's a good question. So there was one interview I did where actually two interviews that I did that were back to back where I was asked to channel a message from the Akashic Records like on the podcast, which like I had never done before, and it kind of like threw me for a loop for a second, but it was actually awesome. So those two kind of stand out to me. But yeah, I mean, I love just like talking to people about stuff. So I
Okay,
enjoy all of them.
sweet. All right, beautiful. Well, I'll do your intro separately, Alyse. And so thank you so much for being here. The first question I ask every single one of my guests that come on for a year and a half now that we've been running the podcast. When you wake up in the morning, Alyse, what is it that makes your heart just sing out loud for the day ahead of you?
So that's a great question. I love this. So for me, it's really around the results that I see other people getting, mainly my clients. And that's the thing that often will like bring me to that place of happy tears when I have, I see one of my clients create these amazing results in their life and create the thing that they've been wanting to create. That's what really just makes me so grateful for what I do.
Awesome. Awesome. So this podcast, we really touch on like how to deepen your connection with yourself, your kids, and your significant other. And I know, why don't you share with the audience the age of your kids, and so we can get a little bit more of who you are.
Yeah, so I have a daughter named Hazel. She's coming up on turning 5. And then my son Levi is coming up on turning 7. Their birthdays are within a week of each other. So,
Hazel and Levi. Awesome. Cool.
yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So you told me right before we pressed record, Alyse was telling me that she's been practicing breathwork for almost 19, 20 years. What what is it about it that made you consistently stick with it? A breathwork practice.
Yeah, so I think for me, it was a couple things. It is the transformation aspects of it, how it is such an efficient tool for transformation. And I've tried, and I love transformation, obviously, that's what I'm all about. And I've tried so many different healing modalities. And to me, I found this to be the quickest and the most
Mm,
efficient. And then also the other aspect of it for me that's so powerful is this deep self-discovery aspect of it,
mm.
where it really allows you to access pieces of yourself that you wouldn't access otherwise, like access to the subconscious mind and being able to understand yourself and what drives you on a much deeper level.
You said quicker. What do you mean by that when you like the quickest as far as what? Because obviously, you've had a consistent long practice.
Yes.
Um, what do you mean by quick? Like, can you
Like
explain that?
seeing tangible results in your life in a short amount of time.
Okay, so when you
That's what I mean
first
by quick.
okay, awesome. So when you first started, and I think this is probably a curious question that everybody listening is on their mind. What was it that triggered? Like, I need to do. Let me try this breath work thing. Like, what was it going on in your life or inside of you that triggered this for yourself to try this?
Yeah, so I was at a place in my life when I was 19. I just finished my first year of college and I was just looking for answers. I was kind of at this place where I was like, is this really it? Like, I'm just going to go to college and get a job and like that's it. Like it just seemed like not something I was willing to accept.
Yeah.
And also I was struggling a lot. I had pretty bad anxiety. I was struggling with an eating disorder and I was just not happy, and I was searching for answers as to why and like what the deeper meaning was of things and like what the deeper purpose was and just wanting to understand more about the world. More than what I had learned from my parents or, growing up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I just wanted to learn more. And I started working at a yoga studio And it was there that I discovered Breathworks. They were having a
Oh,
breathwork class there. And I just felt really drawn to it. And a friend that I worked at the yoga studio with was like, we should do this. And I was like, okay. At the time, I was willing to try anything. I was open to anything. I was
wow.
one of those people that was like hungry for experiences. Like I just wanted to try everything. So I tried it, and it wasn't profoundly impactful the first time. It was just something that I was drawn to. And I just kept on doing it. And I got really involved in the community, and I just started doing all of these trainings, and I shifted my life really quickly. And I think that's what kept me going back to it and kept me wanting to share it.
Did it, as far as like your eating disorder situation,
Mhm.
did it cure, like, did it completely, is that what you attribute to really shifting that?
I do.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
and it's
powerful.
not, yeah. I mean, those types of things, you always have some sort of relationship to it, right? Like
Okay.
it's not like it just I completely forgot that it exists. Like it will rear its head at times, especially when I'm shifting and changing and moving to the next level. But for the most
Mm,
part, at that time, I completely shifted it. Like
mm.
I stopped the really horrible effects of it. So, yes, I attribute breath work to that for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I've done some, personally, to relate to that. I've done some Wim Hof breath work,
Yes. Mhm.
some of his courses and stuff, and it were like, that'll bring out some emotions in you.
Yes.
If anybody
Yes.
listening ever tried, like, if you want to bring out, like, if you want to bring out crying and shaking, I don't know if you're what
Yes.
you're releasing during. I'm not an expert, but wow, it does some wild things. Uh,
Yes. Yes, it does. And
so
that's the purpose of it, is to bring up these emotions that are lying under the surface that are kind of waiting to be felt. Because
mm,
when you do that, it has a tremendous effect on your ability to now see things differently in your life.
well, we always, like, it seems as human beings, we want to suppress our negative feelings inside of
Yes.
us, right? And
Yes.
not a lot
Mhm.
of us, and heck, not a lot of us have the luxury of time to sit with those feelings
Right.
and process
Exactly.
them, right? It's like we have to like
Yes.
schedule it in our calendar. So this breath work, it just somehow releases that. It's almost like, if I want to explain it, when I haven't done it consistently, I just did it here and there. It almost, and you can elaborate on this. It's
Mhm.
just almost like relief, like this
Yes.
feeling of just, oh man, did I need that? Of For me personally, do you get that with your
Right.
clients and stuff that you work with now?
Yes, definitely. So, what's really happening is, especially when we're children, we have these experiences that we don't quite know how to process, right? And I've seen this, I have a background, I was a school counselor for a decade. So, I've seen this with kids, and I know that this happens is when we're kids and we experience something, whether it's, parents fighting or some kind of a traumatic event or something that we perceive as traumatic. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that everyone would think is traumatic. But when we have these high emotional experiences and we're not sure how to process them, we don't process them and we kind of stuff them down, and they actually live in our body and have an energetic signature in our cells, a chemical signature, and we hold on to that energy in the body. So when you use the breath, you actually give those feelings, that stuck energy, a chance to move and release. So that's why you're having those experiences of crying or feeling like really uncomfortable or upset, because when you're doing that, you're actually releasing those stuck emotions, that stuck energy from the body. And that's why you
Mm,
feel that relief afterwards, because you're like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that I needed to release that, but now that I
right.
did, it feels so much better.
That's because it's almost like these things are buried. I'm reading, when I read these spiritual books, which I'm sure you've read plenty of those.
Yeah.
There's a lot. It's a lot about, I keep, I mean, it's very similar messages, just saying it differently, right? And it's constant reminders. I think it's so important. That's why, like, you can't just do breath exercises for 4 days and like the rest of your life is going to be great, right? It's the
Right.
consistency and the daily reminder,
Yes.
just like your relationship with your spouse, right? It's a daily work
Yes.
to make it like the best possible.
Yep.
And it's just about like if like really looking inside ourselves is for me personally, and I've been trying to do this a lot lately. It's be like, am I truly released? Am I truly like happy? Am I truly genuinely like, is everything that I inside of me like let it, has it been let go, or am I holding on and stuffing some stuff still there? And if
Right.
so, how can I get to it? How can I release it? How can I work with it? And breath work, I mean, it's interesting because I just I'm seeing it more and more. Just, I don't know if it's manifesting or what, but like having you on, I had somebody else I was talking to recently about breath. So it might be a sign that that's something that maybe personally I need to do. And people listening, if you're listening to this, there's a reason you're probably listening to it.
Right.
Um, Want to go back real quick. The yoga studio that you worked at, was that like the
Yes.
only one in your town at the time? Because there's
It
a, it's just a curious question, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a funny question. It was the only one that I knew of.
Right.
So it's funny there because that was in 2001.
Right.
And there was, at that time, there was another woman who I'm now friends with who opened another one, like right after that one opened. But when I started working there, it was the first one that I had heard about. And it was a thing. Like it was like a hangout. It was like a, it drew a lot of really cool people and it was like definitely a thing. Whereas now there's so many of them. It's not, I'm sure they have great communities around them, but this was
Right.
like, oh, it's a yoga studio. And it was, yeah, it was pretty cool. And there was another, like I said, another one opened right after that, but then there was like two.
Do you have this right? Do you have this like it's not an ego thing or whatever. This is again just a curious question. This like PC view that when someone says, "Yeah, I practiced yoga a couple years ago," you're like, I've been doing that for like 20 years before it was popular." You got like this little piece of you that kind of feels like, you were part of the beginning of the movement over here. Does that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, oh, I totally know what you mean. Yeah, and there's this thing with yoga too, where it's kind of like more like a gateway drug kind of a thing. Like, yoga is great, but it's also like I think for a lot of people it becomes like an invitation to do more. And a lot of
Mm,
people will go into yoga more for like the physical exercise aspect of it. And then because of it, they end up getting interested in the spiritual side of it.
ah,
So
that's
it's
interesting.
interesting with yoga because, and now like I practiced yoga for many years. I did Ashtanga religiously for like 7 years. And now I don't really practice yoga anymore. Not for any reason other than like I just started doing other things that make sense for me right now.
Sure.
But yeah, it is funny because now it's like such a thing.
Yeah. I well, and I'm going to take a wild guess here, and I think we've all, well, not all, but most of us have probably heard. It's important who you're surrounding yourself with each day, and that can even mean, I don't even know if I've said this before, but that can even mean like who you listen to on a podcast every day, right? That's somebody you're
Totally. Oh,
surrounding yourself
yes.
with on a daily basis.
Yes.
A lot of people think they need to have actual physical surrounding. No, it's different. You can use that. So at that time, because when I was 19, I wasn't trying to figure life out. I was like, I'm gonna party, I'm gonna hook up with chicks, like I'm in college, and I'm gonna get this degree so I can make some money when I get out of college.
Right.
That was all I thought about and cared about. And to think that at 19, you were not, you were like, I want to figure out life. What were you, did you have people around you that were like that?
Not really. So I just want to say too, like I did want to party and have fun, and I did do the whole college thing. Like I drank, I did drugs, I did all of it. Like I was at bars. Like it wasn't like I was like all of a sudden like just down the spiritual path, but I did both, right?
Okay.
Like I was interested in both, and I
Sure.
was interested in understanding things from every angle. So, I totally did the college life and all of that. But there wasn't people around me necessarily. So I met a friend working at a restaurant on my college campus, and she was the one who introduced me to the yoga studio. And once I started working there, I just met a ton of people, and that was kind of how I was introduced to all of this spiritual stuff, and started going down this path and meeting a bunch of people.
So that, yeah. So yeah, suddenly you surround yourself with a different crowd that introduced you to something new.
Yes,
So cool. And
totally.
you immerse yourself and you went with it. You kind of just flowed, right? The whole idea of just going down with the flow of life, right? And seeing where it takes you. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Now fast forward, you've had a lot of transformational experience, a lot of spiritual, I mean, when now you had children, okay, and I wanted to make
Yes.
sure I touched on this. We have the first 3 years are super crucial, right? As we know,
Yeah.
and we can read a
Yeah.
million articles about the first 7 years, right, with
Right.
kids.
Right.
What stuff? I have 1 year left with my daughter, and I have like I got four, I have four left with my son. So I'm really conscious about this stuff.
Yeah.
And a big reason why I actually started the podcast. I want more parents to be conscious of how important it is. What what kind of things, tools, what kind of words, what kind of environment did you create in your home for your kids to thrive?
That's a great question. And this is something that, and I tell my clients this a lot, because I feel like, especially with the work that I do with people, where we're going back and we're looking at stuff that happened in childhood. And I go back with my clients as far as the circumstances around their birth, and even what happened when they were in the womb, and all of these things. And whoever has kids who's doing this automatically is like, oh my God, I'm fucking up my kids. Sorry. You know what I mean? And I'm like,
Sure.
no, it's okay, because so here's the thing, and there's two things that I really feel strongly about this. One is that I truly believe, from a more spiritual perspective, that your kids chose you for a reason. And they chose to come in and have you as parents to learn these specific lessons. You most likely had previous lifetimes together, and you made agreements before this to do this thing together,
Mm,
right? So you're coming in with these agreements, and they chose you for a reason, and it's okay. And there's specific things that they are wanting to learn in this lifetime, and they're going to learn them from the way they interact with you. So that's the first thing that I think can take a little bit of the pressure off, right? Because I think you have a baby, and you have this little being in your hands, and you're like, oh my God, like I can't fuck this up, right? Or I'm responsible for bringing this person into the world, and now, like, oh my gosh, it's overwhelming. So I
mhm.
just want to say that. And then the other thing that I think is really, really important, and I say this not only from a spiritual perspective, but from somebody who spent a decade as a school counselor, being a mental health professional. Like, I've seen the impact that parents have on kids, and I've seen how relationships change between parent and child when the parent gets their shit together, right? So I've
Right.
seen this happen over and over again. And what I will say is that, as a parent, all you need to do is do the personal growth and conscious work on yourself, and model that to your child. It's so much more about that, and so much less about anything that you say, or anything that you try to implement with them, as far as, like, rules or routines or whatever. Like, yes, that stuff has its place,
Mhm.
but if you are modeling to them that you are taking yourself and your own growth and transformation, and taking that seriously, and being the most conscious and best version of yourself that you can be, to me, that's the most important thing that you can model to your children.
Mm. And what
And
are
I was going to say that
yeah,
has like a reverberating effect on them, and
mm,
I've seen it over and over again, where, like, just to give a more extreme example, in my work as a school counselor, like, I would see kids who, when they're in like kindergarten, first, second grade, their parent has a drug problem, right? And you can see it in their behavior at school. their behavior at school suffers, they don't do their work, whatever. And then their parent gets better, right? Their parent gets clean, their parent starts getting involved in their life. The kid turns around immediately. They start
Mm.
behaving better, they do their work, they are happier, like it, and they're a completely different kid. So, from from that perspective, it's interesting because as a school, we look at like, oh, the kid is doing this, we have to do this, we have to do that. But then it's like once the parent changes, the kid changes. So it's really interesting like that.
Wow, that is such great advice. And when you just said that last sentence, it made me think like anytime there's, the kid, the parent gets a phone call about the child's behavior, they should be
Mhm.
calling and saying, "Excuse me, Mrs. Smith, what have you been doing lately that your child's acting like this?" Right?
Yeah, totally, because it
Yeah.
is always a reflection, and I think it's hard because it can be hard to look at it like that, especially if you're coming from the place of like, yeah, my kid did this thing and I'm not sure why they did it. And you don't want to like put it back as a reflection on yourself and be like,
Right.
well, but ultimately there's always some energetic, some dynamic that's being played out by your kid. So, and our kids, I believe, are our greatest teachers, and they will always reflect back to us the things that we have unprocessed or unhealed from that age that they're at. Right. And I see this a lot with my son and my husband. So my son's now getting a little bit older, he's going to be 7. And I can see the dynamics and I see that your kids kind of reflect back to you those things that you need to heal that you haven't dealt with from a young age. So
Mhm.
it's really interesting and that's something to remember too as a parent.
Yeah, yeah, and like, look, it's so much easier said than done, right? And
Totally. Oh my
so,
god,
and
yeah.
and that's why I think it's important to reiterate, you can't just hear somebody say it and I think you're gonna just implement it in your life. Like, you really gotta practice it.
Right.
You really and, if you're a fleeting bag of emotions just up and down all the time and your kid sees that, they're gonna do the same thing. So
Hmm.
that, you can't expect them to be different if you're it's there's a whole lot to it. But uh now to so obviously personal growth, working on yourself, that's amazing. You said something. I'm going to switch the gears a little bit. You talked about going all the way back to in the womb. Like, how do you
Yes.
access that? Like, what is that all about? That's interesting.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I focus on with my clients that I work longer term with, and also in my course, The Metamorphosis, we do some deep work around releasing family patterning, family
Really?
traumas, family dynamics. And one of the things that is really
Huh.
important as a piece of the puzzle to look at, because I always kind of describe this work when we're going through this deep healing is like it's almost like finding all these pieces of the puzzle that are impacting you and then learning how to work with those and transmute them. So often your birth story is one of those pieces of the puzzle. And when I say your birth story, what I mean by that is the circumstances around your birth, the circumstances around when you were conceived, and the circumstances around when you were in the womb. So like what was going on with your parents? Were they together? Were they happy? Were they fighting? What was going on in the world, right? Like what circumstances were impacting that time where you were actually physically coming into form, because that energetic has an impact on the way that you were actually formed and on the unconscious beliefs that you have about the world. And those are even harder to discover in a certain way because they're pre-verbal. So it's not something that you're consciously thinking. It's more of an energetic that's imprinted upon you. So for me, I'll just give an example. When I was in the womb, my parents were both teachers. And when my mom was pregnant with me, they were on strike. And there was this big teachers strike in Philadelphia here in 1981, the year I was born. And they were like scared. They weren't making any money and they were about to have a baby. And there was like all of this fear and stuff. And
Mhm.
in my process of breath work and going back and uncovering the stuff, I realized that I was carrying a lot of that fear from being in the womb and being born into this time of like great fear and uncertainty,
Wait, can I
right?
stop you
So
real quick?
yeah,
Um, did you know that already, or did you discover that through your process?
I knew it, but I discovered its impact on me
Okay.
through the process, if that makes sense.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. That was
Yeah,
okay.
so it's just that's just an example of the ways that the circumstances around our birth can affect us. And there's so many different stories and stuff around this, but yeah, that's part of the work that I do with my
Now,
clients.
are you doing? Because I've heard of, and I've never been through this process. I've done a lot of different programs, different. I've done standing meditation. I've done a lot of things spiritually, to test out. I'm trying to say this the right way. But
Yeah.
I've heard of, and I've never done this piece where like people are able to access memories from like 2, 3, 4 years old and see it vividly almost, and then realize, oh wow, that's where this pain comes from, or this is
Right.
that the kind of stuff that happens through your process that you put together?
Yes. Yeah. So what I use is breathwork sessions that I create that are specifically to help you uncover these things. So I have one and I create these as audio files. So I just create these sessions. I have one that's specifically around your birth. I have one that's around your relationship with your mother, around one that's around your father, and so on and so forth. And then I have them do these different journaling exercises, and then they do the breath work, and it helps you uncover these memories. And the cool thing about it is that every time you do it, you can uncover something else, right? So it's something you can use again and again to continue to uncover deeper layers.
Well, okay. Have you ever had anybody share a story with you that you wouldn't mind, that's pretty out, I don't guess out there, or pretty wild,
Mhm.
that they found out that you can share without using their name, obviously?
Yeah. Okay. Let me try to think because there's been a lot of things. So one of the most common things, not common, but this type of thing is common, not this exact thing, but like this type of thing where the parent will be like really afraid, like say there's some kind of like emergency when the child is born and the parent is afraid that the child is going to die or that something as bad is going to happen. There will be like this imprint of feeling like always feeling like something bad is going to happen or like the other shoe is going to drop or almost this feeling of like survival, like this terrible feeling of survival that is imprinted that actually can impede you from, creating the life that you want or creating the abundance you want or creating the like relationship that you want. So it's stuff like that. I had a client. Okay, this is a good one. So they're flooding back to me now. I had a client who was in her mother's womb when her parents were fleeing from, oh my god, I don't remember what country it was. Vietnam, I think, and they were refugees. And while she was in her mother's womb, she was actually in a refugee camp. And then I can't remember if she was born there or she was born once they got here, but
Hmm.
she had, taken on all of this trauma while she was in the womb of her parents and her two older sisters being in this refugee camp. And it was really interesting because it was hard for her to access because she herself didn't experience it, right? Not consciously because she was in the womb during it.
Right.
So, but this energy had this great impact on her and it was actually impeding different things in her life. Like it was showing up in her relationship with her husband, which was a really big one. And when we were able to really access it and transmute it, her relationship with her husband completely changed, which was really, really powerful.
That's deep.
So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it's stuff like that where, these old traumas that are stuck in the body will actually show up in these different ways. Like for her, it was showing up where she had a lot of anger towards her husband But really her anger wasn't actually for him, it was for this thing that happened, right? But she didn't realize that, because what we do is when we have these feelings, we like project them on the people that are closest to us until we actually realize what they're actually about, and then we can release them.
Well,
So
if we ever actually
that's
get to that point, right? Like most people
right.
don't,
Right. And that's what I love
unfortunately.
helping people get to, because once you get to that, you can radically shift your life.
Right.
But it's just about getting to that.
Yeah, and this is brings up such an interesting topic, and I can relate to it so much because if I went to so I'm a certified, meditation teacher, whatever that means. There's a lot of people that can certify you, so I think it's funny. But
Right.
I've recorded dozens. I have a course, a parenting course, and from that's a meditation course. And 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I went to a Tony Robbins event,
Mhm.
and it was 7 days. It was like 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. It was real intense, hoorah, all this stuff. But there was a lot of meditation being done during it. First time ever I was ever introduced to meditation was at this event. And
Mhm.
I'm like,
Mhm.
this is stupid. Like literally, that was going through my mind, right? Like what? And they were like trying to get me to, they were going out. I was just the whole time, my mind's just going, what the hell's going on? What the hell's going on? I had no idea. Which looking back on it, I'm like, man, maybe they should have been like, hey, if you haven't meditated before, here's the deal. Gives people a
Right.
little info. Anyway, there's a point to my story. Um, but so I was like, this is ridiculous. Anyway, and then I fell in love with it after reading a book and learning more about it. Maybe the event helped. I don't know. My wife was also a yoga teacher, so she kind of got me into spirituality a little more.
Mhm.
Slowly, it took a while, but I was like so cut off to wanting to like. I just thought I just knew everything, knew a lot, and thought I had it all together. Like, I'm fine. I don't need. And so nobody could tell me that I needed to do this work, right? And
Right.
I was kind of an asshole to people and I was just like, oh, I guess I'm just kind of a jerk, right? Like that's who I am.
Right. Yeah.
So it it's really like what could somebody have said to me? And that's what I try to figure out a lot. And maybe you have an answer or you just don't even deal with it at all. When you see somebody who's really hurting, struggling, that's not in your course, not taking anything, but you really have this like innate feeling of like, man, if only they could just open their eyes a little bit, I would be able to go in there and just give them a little bit of relief and help them maybe put them on a different path. Is there do you just but like someone like me back then is so cut off, I wouldn't even bother. Do you try to help? Do you
So
just
this is this is an interesting question, and this is something that I've always kind of struggled with, and I still do sometimes. And even with my husband, right? Like my husband and I have been together for 12 years, married for 8. And what I've realized, especially with him, but with a lot of people, is like people have to want to change, and people have to be willing, and they have to really want it. And, even, for instance, like with friends or something that are really struggling, it's hard because I know that I can help them. And I know that if they were open to me helping them, I could help them have like major life shifts. So
right,
it's frustrating, especially when you love someone
right,
and you want the best for them. It's hard to not say anything, and it does get frustrating. But at the same time, it's also frustrating to say something or try to help and they're not really open to it, or they're not really getting it. And I realized that you have to let people come to it in their own way and in their own time. And also, there's this thing that I always say, which is respect their incarnation. Like maybe they're not going to get to that in this lifetime,
right,
and that's okay, and we need to be okay with that. But what I've noticed also, and especially with my husband, is I really intentionally am the model of what I want to create and what I'm trying to be, or what I am being, right? I don't want to say trying, I don't like that word. But what I'm being, right? And what happens with him almost 99% of the time is eventually he wants to do it, right? Like it takes him a lot longer to come to the understanding. But once he does, he's like, okay, like, tell me what to do. Like, he's
That's the best. Like we could all relate to that. I mean, on many different levels. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it's funny because then, there'll be certain people that I'll see following me or kind of dancing around my field for a while, but they don't actually want to jump in. And then, 9, 10 months later, they're like, okay, like I'm ready, So I think it just, sadly, there's really nothing we can do. It's kind of the same thing as like, somebody who's like an alcoholic or a drug addict. Like, you can't make them get better. They have to want
Mm.
to. And it's really the same thing with this, because it's a journey of personal growth, and it requires commitment, and it requires willingness. And if someone's not willing, then there's nothing that we can really do, sadly. And it is hard because I've had things happen where I'm like, oh, this sucks, because I get if it's somebody I love, I get upset, because I'm like, I know I can help you, but there's nothing you can really do.
Yeah. And that's like, personally, I'm just so grateful and glad that whatever happened. I don't, I couldn't tell you, and you probably couldn't tell me the exact events, because everything just kind of happens, right? That leads you to this path of wanting to shift, right? And then it just opens me up to saying, "Oh yeah, I'll try that and see how it could help me. Oh, I'll try that."
Right.
And when you see somebody that's like, "No, that sounds stupid," I'm like, I don't know. It's like, well, how could you just cut yourself off of
Right.
experiences, or just have such strong opinions when you have no clue? I don't know. And maybe it's just scary for somebody. Maybe it's just not the right time. And
Yeah,
so
I
you just
think it's
gotta, yeah,
scary for
yeah.
people. And it also is like that feeling, what I'm getting the image of as you're talking is like my daughter who refuses to try food that she's never tried. And we're always like, but you haven't tried it. You don't know if you like, she's like, no, I don't like it. And I'm like, but you didn't try it.
Daniel Tiger tries everything.
Exactly. 3 bite rule or whatever he says.
Yeah, exactly. So, oh man, what I have a question. Are these the blankets, or you have behind you on the wall? Am I right to say
Oh
that?
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
more more just me being curious about if they have meaning or representation, or what's going on.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, this room was first built as my yoga room.
Hmm.
So my husband and I built this house 7 years ago, and we built this yoga room in the basement because at the time I was very dedicated to practicing Ashtanga, which I don't know if you know about Ashtanga, but it's the type of yoga where you practice it at the crack of dawn every day, and it's like this really hard like set series. So anyway, we built this room because at the time when we built the house, I was pregnant with my son, and then I had him right before we moved in. And I wanted to be able to practice yoga at home in a nice space, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to go out to the studio anymore since he was born. So we built this yoga room, and then this has now also become my office. So it doubles as a yoga room and my office. And so this wall hanging right here is actually really special to me. I actually bought that when I was in India.
Oh, cool.
I visited an ashram. Amma, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's the hugging saint. She is an Indian woman who's like highly enlightened, and she just goes around. Then the way that she blesses people is she hugs them. And you can Google her. She's like has a huge following and stuff. But anyway, I stayed at her ashram in the summer of 2007. It was 2007. And this is like the emblem of her ashram. And that says in Sanskrit the name of her ashram, which it's a really long name and I forget how to say it now.
Sure, sure.
Amritanandamayi, I think it's called.
Okay.
And then this back here is Kali, which is the Hindu goddess of like destruction. So she's like the creator and destroyer of men. And when I first started practicing yoga in 2001, I got really into like the Hindu deities, and I loved just the imagery of them. I actually have a you can't see it now, but I have a tattoo of Shiva on my arm. So I was always very into the Hindu deities. And that is, I actually think that was from the yoga studio that I worked at way back when. So yeah.
Cool. Do you recommend that? Did you get obviously you got hugged by?
Yes, many times.
Did you feel the energy? I mean,
Yes, it's a really, really cool experience. So
wow.
the first time, because she does a US tour every summer, so you can go see her. She goes to different cities in the US. And actually, I think she goes to Toronto. I don't know how close you are to
I'm
Toronto,
in
but
Rochester, New York, so that's where.
Oh, I thought you said you were in
Well,
Canada for
I'm
some
an
reason.
hour and 20 minutes from the border, so
Oh,
that's
right, right,
where.
right. Yeah, I've been up there. um, okay, so yeah, so she does like a US tour every year, so you can go see her and get a hug, but it's really interesting. So she is like very enlightened and you can feel the energy around her for sure. It's a really, really cool experience. What I don't love is like all of the other stuff that goes along with it. Like it's very like, especially since she's gotten bigger, like everyone who kind of works for her, it's just like they kind of push you along and you got to go this way and go that way. And it's kind of like, that whole thing I'm not super into, but the actual experience of getting a hug from her is something I would recommend. It's a profound experience.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
super. That's super neat. I haven't. What's really beautiful about just growth in general is there's so much, to learn, experience, and do. It's never ending. You've
Oh
shared some
yeah.
stuff on here that I've never either heard of or barely touched on before on this podcast,
Yeah.
and there are times where I'm like, oh, I've heard it all, which obviously I know that I'm like, no, Justin, you're not even close to having heard it all, right? It's
Right. Right.
and yeah, I would love an experience over in India. It would be pretty powerful. Actually, yesterday just it was the first time I ever had this conversation with my wife. I was like, would you ever wanna go experience something in India spiritually or stay there for a week, do something, a yoga, meditation, whatever it is? And she's like, yeah, we should look into that in the future.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to be, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Especially where I was in India, it was very remote, like it wasn't very developed at all. So it was a very interesting experience. The way
That's cool.
I've often described it is like I was constantly looking around for something that resembled something I've seen before,
Ah,
and I never found it. Like it was just so different than, anything you see in the US.
wow. That'll put you in an uncomfortable, unknown position to tap into things inside of you, right? I mean,
Oh,
what I could imagine.
totally. Yes. I was uncomfortable most of the time, I'll be honest with you.
Was there breakthroughs on the other side of that uncomfortableness, or would you say or no?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely kind of showed me a lot about myself,
Okay.
that I didn't previously it required a lot of me. I'll say
Wow.
that, like to confront different parts of myself and, this part of myself that kind of relied on certain comforts and certain things to make me feel like quote unquote safe. Um, when that stuff is kind of stripped away, you kind of get to see a more vulnerable part of yourself that you don't always access. Yeah.
Vulnerability. That's another topic for another day to have you on. So there
Totally.
was a note I have on here. Um, I had a couple notes and we pretty much talked on them, but Akashic Records.
Yes.
Speaking of never hearing about something, this is the first time that term has come into my mind, and also on 110 episodes of the podcast. So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Cool.
What's up with that?
Okay, so the Akashic Records, the way that I like to describe them is, or the way that I understand them, is the Akashic Records are essentially a living library of everything that has ever occurred in the universe and everything that will ever occur in the universe. So when we tap in, like if I tapped into your Akashic Records, I'd be looking at the evolution of your soul, like everything your soul has ever experienced and everything your soul will experience or is wanting to experience. So it's
Previous
just like
lifetimes and everything. Like,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just like a wealth of information. It's funny. Somebody I was on another podcast with, he called it the universe's Google. Like it's literally just like a wealth of information, right? So the way that I like to describe it when I'm tuning into the records, it's like I'm tuning into this frequency of information. And then what I'm doing is when I tune into the frequency, I'm translating what I'm seeing and feeling into words for you. So when we go into your records, you could essentially like, you know, ask me a bunch of questions. I can tune in. I will tell you what I see and I will give you answers. And for me specifically, I know depending on who you get a reading from, the information could be different, right? Depending on what type of information they get. For me, I always get a lot of information around your soul's purpose and where you're wanting to expand into. So like what the ways in which your soul is desiring to expand, and then what is kind of blocking you from stepping into that expansion. So that's a lot of the information that I'll get in the records.
You can access this with somebody via a Zoom call, or does it need to be in person?
Yeah. No, we could do it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What about so if somebody wanted to do this and was interested,
Mhm.
how do we get a reading from you, Alyse?
Oh, you can just schedule it through my website. You can schedule it right on my website, alysebreathes.com. And we can talk about anything. I do them for people's businesses too. So we can do them specifically around your business. I'll tune into the energy of your business and I'll just see exactly like what you should be doing to expand and grow your business essentially. So it's really cool. I mean,
how did you become this source?
yeah. So, you know, I have always had a really, it was always easy for me to tune into people's energy and understand them on a deeper level. Like I always had that ability. And then, you know, when I started to really share breathwork on it in a deeper way, when I started my business, I started to really tune into my psychic ability and really begin to like share my gifts. And then I found out about the Akashic Records in like early 2020, and I was immediately drawn to them. And then I did a little like 4-week course to learn how to read them. And the first time I entered my own records, I had like this really profound experience of like crying, like unconditional love. And it was like this feeling where like I knew that this was something I was supposed to do. And like from that time forward, I started giving Akashic record sessions, reading people's records, using the records for myself. It was just kind of like this thing that I automatically was able to do.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was
That's
kind of
really fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, the Akashic Records are an amazing resource because you will always get the truth in the records because it vibrates at this very high frequency of truth and knowledge. So
I don't
like
know
you
if I
can
want the truth.
It's funny, some people say that. I actually offered a session to one of the people that does design work for me, and she was like, I don't think I'm ready for that.
That's funny. No, I
Yeah.
think I do. But at this point I should want, I think I'm going to schedule something with you after
Yeah,
this.
definitely.
Sure.
I'd love to.
I'm going to get on there.
Yeah.
And then I'll share with maybe I'll share what my results were on the pod on a future episode or something.
Yeah, that would be fun. At
Huh.
least the highlights, you know.
Yeah, if it's too personal, maybe I won't.
Yeah, you can give the overview.
You're like, you might not want to share everything.
I know, like you might not want to promise that, but
I did get I had somebody do I don't even know what it's called. I can't think of the term, but my Sanskrit mantra based on my
oh,
birth
okay.
and my,
Yeah,
time you
like
were
your
born.
Vedic astrology,
Yeah,
like
I
through
guess.
Vedic astrology.
Yeah, and then they gave me my mantra for meditation through that,
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
based on the stars that were out at the time and what were aligned with
Right.
the time I was born, the day, and all that. That was pretty cool
Yeah,
experience.
that's cool.
If you could, so I mean, heck, you were started this journey pretty early in your life, but if you could go back and you have two kids, and when they were 18 or when you were 18, what would you say to your 18-year-old self if you could today go back and like go back in time and tell them anything or give them any advice? And she would listen.
I think the number one thing that I would want my younger self to have is more confidence and more trust in myself. I think for me, the thing that really shifted when it came to like sharing my gifts and helping people is being able to trust the information that I was receiving and sharing that. So like just trusting myself, trusting my intuition, trusting my ability. I think that's kind of what kept me blocked in my younger years is just not trusting myself and not trusting the gifts that I had to share and kind of like pushing them down because I was afraid and I didn't want people to think I was weird and I wanted to like be like everybody else. So I think just trusting myself and having the confidence to really be who I am. Um, I mean, honestly, I'm glad everything worked out the way it did, but at the same time, I that's what I would tell the younger version of myself.
Yeah, I really, that was great. Like, I've had a lot. I mean, I've asked everybody that question. I don't believe anybody's ever put it like that. That was really, really powerful. Actually, and somebody listening probably will benefit from that. So thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Now, does that, I have to ask this follow-up question to that. Does that have, because you started your um really your business completely like immersing yourself in it in 2019, why
Mhm.
not 10 years before that?
I don't think I had the confidence or the trust in myself. I think like when I first started doing breath work and I started, like I would teach it, I would teach groups and I did have private clients, but there was a part of myself that always thought like, oh, I'll never be able to do this type of a thing. Like I'll never be able to have my own business. I didn't think that I had it in me. And even like, my husband, like I said, we've been together 12 years. He's an entrepreneur. I've watched him start like probably 5 different businesses in the time that we've been together. And I always would like watch what he did and think like that I could never do that. I just never had that confidence or trust in my ability. And that's why I didn't. I think if I did, I think I would have started it back then, in my early 20s.
Yeah, I can see that's why the advice you would give. That's really powerful stuff. Are you glad that you did now? And are you
Um,
full, yeah, like are you super stoked about what the future has and what you're into now?
oh yeah, definitely. And I see like I'm really grateful for the way that everything was. Like I think in my career as a school counselor, I not only had a tremendous impact on myself, but on not myself, on other people, but like and on myself, but there's this really beautiful intersection that happens in like what your talents are and what your experience was, right? And I feel like one of my gifts and talents is to be able to really see where people are blocked based on what happened to them in childhood. So I have that gift, but then I also have this decade of experience working with young kids as a mental health professional. So like it becomes this really beautiful intersection where not only do I have the gift, but I have this like experience that informs that and they kind of bounce off of each other. So I'm super
Yeah.
grateful for that.
You're like the perfect, you're like the perfect person to get into what you're doing, because of that. Like,
Right.
and the more you can realize that about yourself, the more you can impact. That's great. That's beautiful. Where, let's tell, we'll wrap this up here, and where can we learn more about you? Where can we take your course? I know we mentioned it before. It was Alysebreathes.com, ALYSE breathes.com. And
Yep.
is it just like tabs on there? And then there's a couple options?
Yeah, we just my husband is my team member. He just redid my site for me. So I have a brand new site that just we're still kind of tweaking it a bit, but it's up. So it's the new version 2.0 of my site. Everything is on there. You can book Akashic Records readings. You can also check out my other offerings. One of the other fun things I do is I make personalized breathwork sessions for people that are channeled in your Akashic Records. So those are really cool because I have you just fill out a little form and then I make a breathwork session specifically for you and I send it to you and you can, have that in your toolbox as part of your practice. And you can get that off my website as well. And then I
Wow.
have my bigger courses and stuff. All that stuff is on there.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I learned a ton. I'm sure people listening really enjoyed this. So thank you so much for being on here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.